Okay, hello and welcome to another episode of News from the Gelding. Today I'm going to be showing you a time lapse of a drawing that's going to be used for the cover of my second book. So if you want to cut straight to there, go to here. Otherwise, if you want to hear a bit of my rambling nonsense, stick around and I'll be with you shortly. Okay, hello, my regular viewers, because I imagine everyone else has skipped ahead or they've just turned it off altogether. Okay, so as I used to do, I'll do a bit of that now, just talk about news for the previous week. So first of all, the drawing, I finally finished that, so that's splendid. And I've made the film, which we'll see later. It went fairly okay. I was in a bit of doubt after I'd finished it as to whether I'd use it, but I think it's going to be okay. Well, you can see it later and see what I've done and see what you think. Second bit of news, beard news. Let's do a bit of beard news. So I was thinking of chopping it off after my 40th birthday, but I think what I'm going to do is hang on to it until Christmas, and then I can perhaps do a bit of Father Christmas shenanigans here and there. Who knows? And I quite like the beard. I mean, it's getting a bit big, but I don't think I'll let it get too much bigger. Anyway, beard news. There we are. Next thing, wrist news. Okay, so I went to the hospital on, well, it was yesterday, yeah, for an ultrasound on this wrist. See a little dot there? That's where they were scanning it, and there's no one around there somewhere. Okay, so they had a good look, and there's nothing untoward other than the bone. So tissue-wise, it's all fine, which is a bit of a problem. Anyway, the specialist I saw this time was, he had a look at the x-ray I had back in June, 4 months ago, and he said something to his another doctor saying, well, that doesn't look right there, and they weren't going to say any more about it, and I said, what's going on, what's not right? And he said, well, the x-ray hasn't been taken properly, it's not showing the correct view. And that's what I said to him. I said, when I had the x-ray done in Bath, it looked, you could see a definite displacement of the bone with the rod going through it, and that didn't show up in the x-ray I had in Exeter. So now I'm going to have to wait and have a CT scan to get some more detail on the bone. I'm fairly sure that this bone hasn't been put back together properly, and I've used it now for 10 years and it's starting to cause problems. But anyway, we'll see what happens there. All I know is I don't really want to carry on with it as it is. Last bit of news. Slug news. We've been getting slugs coming into our house, and I think they're waltzing through the door in my studio, right down through into the kitchen, and helping themselves to the kitchen tops and whatever else they want to. Every time we come after when we wake up, we see lots of trails everywhere, which isn't very pleasant, especially when it's on the chopping board and they walk all around there or slither around there. Not quite sure what to do to stop them, really. So what I may do in the future is set up a camera and see if I can film them and see what they're getting up to. I've caught a couple of them in the act, and they're great big devils and not very pleasant to look at. But I just take them outside and put them in someone else's garden. But I think they're coming back again. Quite clever. Okay, so there we are. That's that bit of news out of the way. Wonderful. Right, let's get down to business. Before I do anything more, I'll just show you the time lapse, and I will go from there. Okay, see you in a bit.
put my hand on her knee, and she says, do you want to see? I put my hand on her breast, and she says, do you want a kiss? Gently, 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 Johnny, gently, Johnny, my jingle all. Gently, 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 Johnny, gently, Johnny, my jingle all. I put my hand on her thigh, and she says, do you want to try? I put my hand on her belly, and she says, do you want to fill me? Gently, 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 Johnny, gently, Johnny, my jingle. Gently, 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 Johnny, gently, Johnny, my jingle.
Okay, hello and welcome back. Right, if you've seen the whole of the time lapse, you'll notice that I didn't actually show the entire process. I only showed the drawing of the rings. I did film the rest of the drawing, but I was moving the paper around so much that it became very unpleasant to watch when sped up. In fact, what I showed you is probably bad enough. That head-mounted rig that I used, it's good for drawing in real time, but for a time lapse you really need a fixed point of view. It was just an experiment really, but I don't think I'll be doing that again. But it gave you an idea of how I went about drawing it, or the process of drawing. You might have noticed a ghost image that I was drawing on top of, so I'll talk about that later, but I needed something to follow to keep it so consistent. The other thing was the music. I hope you liked it. It was from my favourite film, one of my favourite films, The Wicker Man, the first one, made in the 1970s, horror film. It's got an amazing soundtrack, and that's one of the songs from it. Not to be confused with The Abomination, that is the Nicolas Cage remake.
And you're doing it for nothing! Killing me won't bring back your goddamn honey!
Indeed, enough said. But it is quite a funny film though. It's worth watching just for that. I may do another video in the future talking about The Wicker Man. Who knows? Okay, so I'll bring up the drawing again, and the drawing I did for the first book. So the first thing was that I wanted it to reference the previous one. I want to keep a certain consistency between the covers. So initially this is going to be a trilogy of books. So I want them all to have that same guiding structure. The colors will be different and there'll be different images within that central window. So we can see here how I turned that drawing into the cover. I'm going to have to do the same with this drawing, although I'm not quite sure where it's going to go just yet. I still have to, the next thing to do will be to work on the painting that will go in the background, like the first book. Okay, so this time, well, for the first one, I used, I wanted it to reference the Galendar carvings. So I was trying to make it look like a wood carving of sorts, or an alien, but an alien looking kind of shape. For this one, I wanted to reference the weave folk that appear in the second book. There's a previous episode where I talk about who the weave folk are. And so you can have a look at that if you like. So I wanted this cover to reference that, the woven, a woven structure from dried grass. Now, the weave folk and this aesthetic that comes from that, I've based on an aspect again of Japanese culture. So when I lived in Japan, I visited what some people think is the oldest shrine in Japan, in Shimane Prefecture, which is north of Hiroshima. And hanging in the entrance of a lot of Japanese shrines is what we would call a sacred rope. They call it shimenawa. And it used to be traditionally woven from hemp, but the ones now are woven from wheat or rice straw. But quite impressive structures in themselves. The one I saw at Izumo was incredible. I mean, it was huge. Hopefully there's some pictures coming up now. You can see the kind of scale. I mean, the thing must weigh a ton. And those sections that are drooping down, there's 3 of them. You can take a coin, a Japanese coin, and you can throw it up, and if it lodges in there, it's considered good luck. So yeah, I did a fair bit of that, but it's kind of dangerous because the coin can go anywhere. But anyway, but the look of that weave, it always stuck in my mind, and when I came up with the idea for these weave folk, I realized that this gave me a basis on which to form what their kind of environment might look like if everything is woven from dried grass. And so the weave folk create everything from this grass that surrounds them. Their homes and their clothes, weapons, tools, everything is woven. And so I used that aesthetic that I saw in the sacred rope and tried to replicate it for the cover. This was quite tricky. I've been working on this for quite a long time now. So I wanted there to be a certain uniformity to the weave. So a weave by its nature is fairly uniform. It has to create a structure of whatever you're creating that's woven. So I had to somehow replicate that. So the first drawing I did for the first book, I just did freehand. I just did the whole thing, just made it up on the spot as a kind of doodle. I couldn't approach the second one in the same way. I needed to have an underlying structure. And so that ghostly outline you can see, perhaps, I think you can see it in the time lapse, that was the product of quite a bit of work beforehand. So I used an image of some rope and got it into this perfect circle, and then used that to radiate it out from a central point. I did a few different versions of this, but the one I finally came up with, I then printed out, traced the lines that I wanted, rescanned it and then printed it very faintly on the page. So I'm using that as the backbone upon which the drawing was made. And then I was kind of just working over that in any way I wished, but keeping that uniform shape and the regularity of the knots or the weave. Yeah, so that's how it turned out. So I used a freebie pencil for most of it, and some of the darker areas I used a 6B. The first drawing I used a lot darker pencil, but it's because it's a lot softer, it's harder to get detail. And as I was doing a lot of line work, I thought I'd go for slightly harder lead. But in Photoshop, obviously, you can darken it, so that's what I've done. Okay, so, right, I better stop there. Yep. I hope you enjoyed this one. I think next I'm going to have to start working on the next painting. And as the last one took a month to do or more, I better start doing that soon. Any hopes that I might have had for releasing this second book in November are pretty slim. So it may be in the new year, early new year. But we shall have to wait and see. I'm not going to do as much planning for this painting. I'm going to do a little bit, and then I'm just going to nail it, hopefully. I bought a tripod last week, and I'm going to use that to make the new time lapse. So hopefully it's going to be a lot better quality than the ones I've been doing, because I've just been using this webcam, which isn't a very good way of doing things. Okay, I better stop there because I'm rambling. Hope you all have a lovely week. And if all goes to plan, I'll see you next week as usual. Cheerio.